Another Friday, another Joel movie review. After covering two films over the last 2 weeks, both based on Stephen King's novels, last week it was The Dead Zone, the week before was Silver Bullet, based on King's Cycle of the Werewolf, I decided for the time being to step away from the movies based on Mr. King's novels, as I look to go to another master of horror, John Carpenter. For those who are new to my channel, I had covered John Carpenter's Halloween in episode 1 on my movie review series. And here I am with episode 28, and today I cover John Carpenter's 1980 film, The Fog. As usual, when you're done watching this video, you can check out past videos in my movie review playlist, which is in the description box. And now, on with the video. The Fog is a 1980 American supernatural horror film directed by John Carpenter, who also co-wrote the screenplay and created the music for the film. It stars Adrienne Barbeau, Jamie Lee Curtis, Tom Atkins, and Janet Leigh, also starring Hal Holbrook. It tells the story of a strange glowing fog that sweeps over a small coastal town in northern California, bringing with it the vengeful ghost of leprous mariners who were killed in a shipwreck there a century before. Filmed in the spring of 1979, The Fog was scheduled for a Christmas release that year by ABCO Embassy Pictures, but its release date was delayed until February 1st, 1980. The film divided critics upon release, receiving praise for its visuals and acting, and criticism for its structure and screenplay. Despite the mixed reviews, the film grossed $21.3 million domestically. The Fog contains themes of revenge and repressed corrupt historical events resurfacing in contemporary small-town America. The initial inspiration for The Fog came to John Carpenter when he and collaborator, then girlfriend, Deborah Hill, were promoting their film Assault on Precinct 13 in England. The two visited Stonehenge. During the trip, they were witness to an eerie fog rolling over the landscape from a distance. Carpenter stated that he drew additional inspiration for the story from the British film The Trollenberg Terror, released in 1958, which dealt with monsters hiding in the clouds. Carpenter named characters in the screenplay after people with whom he had collaborated on previous projects. Among them are Dan O'Bannon, a screenwriter who worked with Carpenter on the movie Dark Star, released in '74. Nick Castle, who portrayed Michael Myers in Halloween. Tommy Wallace, an editor, sound designer, and art designer who worked on Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13, as well as several other subsequent projects. The babysitter in the film, Mrs. Kobritz, is named after Richard Kobritz, who produced Carpenter's 1978 television film, Someone's Watching Me. Other references are interwoven into the film include the name of the John Houseman character, Mr. Machin, a reference to the Welsh horror fantasist Arthur Machen, a radio report that mentions that Arkham Reef and the town's coroner, Dr. Phibes, was named after the titular character of the horror films starring Vincent Price from the early 70s. The Fog was a 2-picture deal with ABCO Embassy Pictures, along with his next film, Escape from New York. Filming took place from April to May of 1979 at Raleigh Studios in Hollywood, interior scenes, and on location at several other cities in California, include Point Reyes, Bolinas, Inverness, and the Episcopal Church of the Ascension in Sierra Madre. Original production budget was approximately $900,000. The film was shot by cinematographer Dean Cundy, and Carpenter stated that the appearance of the film was inspired by Val Lewton-produced horror films I Walk with a Zombie, released in '43, and Isle of the Dead, released in 1945, which he describes as very shadowy, all suggestion, and he has all sorts of melodrama going. I was a real fan of that sort of thing. Although a lower budget independent film, Carpenter chose to shoot the anamorphic 2.35-1 format to elevate the visual appearance. In the post-production, after viewing a rough cut of the film, Carpenter was dissatisfied with the results. Recalling the experience, he commented, "It was terrible. I had a movie that didn't work, and I knew it in my heart." Carpenter subsequently added the prologue of Mr. Machin, played by John Houseman, telling ghost stories to fascinate children by a campfire. Houseman played a similar role in the opening of the 1981 film Ghost Story, which was filmed on a soundstage. Carpenter added several other new scenes and reshot others in order to make the film more comprehensible, more frightening and gorier. Among the additions were the sequence in which Curtis's character is approached by a walking dead corpse in a morgue, as well as the finale in which Barbeau's character ascends to the roof of the lighthouse to escape the mariner's ghost. Carpenter and Deborah Hill said the necessity of a reshoot became especially clear to them compete with horror films that had higher gore content. Approximately 1/3 of the finished film is the additional footage completed during reshoots. The reshoots increased the film's budget from $900,000 to $1.1 million. As far as the casting went, the casting the female lead was Adrienne Barbeau, who was at the time John Carpenter's wife, who had appeared in Someone's Watching Me movie in 1978. This was her first feature film. Barbeau was also appeared in John Carpenter's next film, Escape from New York. Tom Atkins, who was a friend of Adrienne Barbeau's, was cast as Nick Castle. The Fog was Atkins' first appearance in a Carpenter film. He also appeared in Escape from New York as well as Halloween 3: Season of the Witch in 1982, which was produced and scored by Carpenter. Jamie Lee Curtis, who was the main star of Carpenter's 1978 film Halloween, appeared as Elizabeth. Commenting on the role and on appearing in another Carpenter film, she said, "That's what I love about John. He's letting me explore different aspects of myself. I'm spoiled rotten now. My next director is going to be almost a letdown." In the retrospective interview, Curtis stated that her part was written into the film by Carpenter, who felt sympathy for her after the success of Halloween, and it failed to lead her obtaining other roles. This was also the first collaboration between John Carpenter and character actor George Buckflower, who would go on to appear in 4 more films directed by Carpenter, which would be Escape from New York, Starman, They Live, and Village of the Damned. We now get to the plot of the movie. On the eve of the centennial of the small coastal town of Antonio Bay in Northern California, old Mr. Machin tells ghost stories to children by a campfire on the beach. One story is about a clipper ship that crashed against the rocks nearby, causing all of its crew to drown after mistaking a campfire for a lighthouse while sailing through the unearthly fog. Machin finishes the story as midnight strikes. A paranormal activity begins occurring around the town. Town priest Father Malone discovers his grandfather's diary. The journal reveals that a century earlier, in 1880, 6 founders of Antonio Bay, including Malone's grandfather, deliberately wrecked a clipper ship named the Elizabeth Dane, so that his wealthy leprosy-afflicted owner, Blake, would not establish a leper colony nearby. The conspirators used the gold plundered from the ship to establish the town. Meanwhile, out at sea, a strange glowing fog develops a fisherman's trawler. The fog brings with it the Elizabeth Dane, carrying the vengeful ghost of Blake and his crew, who kill the fishermen. The following morning, local radio DJ Stevie Wayne is given a piece of driftwood by her son Andy, who found it on the beach. It is inscribed with the word Dane. Stevie takes it with her to the lighthouse, where she broadcasts her radio show. As she is listening to music on a cassette, the driftwood begins seeping water. As the water touches her cassette player, a man's voice is inexplicably heard on the tape, swearing revenge, and the words, "Six must die," appear on the wood before it bursts into flames. Stevie extinguishes the fire and sees that the wood once again reads Dane, and the tape is once again playing normally. Town residents Nick and Elizabeth find a lost fishing trawler adrift and the corpse of one of the fishermen. Later, Elizabeth is in the autopsy room alone, and the fisherman's corpse briefly comes out to life and accosts her before collapsing. Nick and coroner Dr. Fibbs see the now lifeless corpse has carved the number 3 on the floor with a scalpel. That evening, as the town begins its celebrations, local weatherman Dan is killed by the ghost at the weather station. The fog has returned and starts moving inland, disrupting the town's telephone and power lines. Using a backup generator, Stevie begs her listeners to go to her house and save her son. The ghosts kill her son's babysitter, but Nick and Elizabeth rescue Andy. Stevie advises her listeners to head to the town's church, but then finds herself trapped and under siege by the ghosts when the fog envelops her lighthouse. Seeking refuge inside the church, a group of townsfolk find a large gold cross in the wall cavity, made from the rest of the stolen gold from the Elizabeth Dane. Just as the fog begins enveloping the church and the ghosts begin their attack, Malone, knowing that the ghosts have returned to take 6 lives in lieu of the original 6 conspirators, offers the gold and himself to spare the others. The ghost of Blake himself sees the gold cross, and he and his crew disappeared in a blinding flash of light. As the fog miraculously vanishes, Stevie, now alone again in the lighthouse, warns her listeners that the fog could come again and instructs any ships that can hear her to keep an eye out for it. As everyone leaves the church, Malone remains inside and wonders why he was spared, given that there were only 5 deaths. The fog then reappears along with the ghosts, and Blake decapitates Malone, making it 6. End of story. The Fog was released in movie theaters on February 1st, 1980. Its theatrical run lasted a total of 152 weeks, and it ultimately grossed $21.3 million in the United States and Canada, with $11 million of total being rentals, so to speak. Upon its release, The Fog received mixed responses from critics. Someone in the New York Daily News gave the film a middling 2 out of 4 star review, praising the performances but writing that Carpenter obviously is entranced by ghost stories, but he seems willing to sacrifice story to effect. Kevin Thomas of the Los Angeles Times similarly lauded the acting and complimented the film as an elegant and scary thriller of the supernatural that's far more impressive and satisfying than Carpenter's grisly and pointless but profitable Halloween. Give me a break.
Overall rating for The Fog is an 85 out of 100. Even though they had a remake done in 2005, which got a PG-13 rating, which I really didn't agree with at all. I think they should have stayed with the original formula for the remake and not fuck it up by having teenagers in there. But that's just me talking about it. But you know what? I thought this movie, The Fog, was truly one of Carpenter's best directed films. Just like Halloween was 2 years before. So that concludes this week's Joe Love's Movie Review. Expect another episode every Friday.
No.